Hello, welcome to the Craft House Magic Setter tutorials. Today I'm going to show you how I make this little snowman Christmas tree decoration. You could always make multiples to make a garland as well, which would be lovely. So what we're going to need is some stuffing. This is some polyester stuffing that I picked up from my local haberdashery, but you could always use little bits of scrap fabric or yarn that you've got lying around left over from other projects. I've got a piece of white fleece here that I've picked up because I think it gives a nice texture and it's easier to get a nice finish when you're going to be stitching around using a blanket stitch. So it's better to use a fabric that's not going to fray around the edges. I've got a pair of scissors and the yarns I'm going to use, or the threads I'm going to use, are these sized 10 cotton threads, and the particular make is Puppets, but any sort of cotton thread that's relatively thick. This is a size 10, but you could use a size 8 or 12, anything similar to that weight. Just thick enough so you can see the stitches. Some little black beads for his eyes, some PVA glue, a needle. Now I'm using a chenille needle which has got quite a large eye so that I can get this thick thread through the eye. This is a size 22 and I picked these up off Amazon, I think, or one of the craft stores. They're really easy to get hold of. So your chenille needle is also nice and sharp rather than tapestry needle, which will be blunt and harder to get through your fabric. But you need to make sure that your needle will go through the beads and your buttons as well. So like I said, I've got a few little buttons for his tummy. And I've picked up a couple of scraps of ribbon that I'm going to use for the little tab to hang him up and also for his scarf. But you could use any sort of material you've got lying around. I particularly like this red and white dotty. And also I've got a little bit of a scrap of like an orangey fleece for his nose. But you could use a different means of making his nose if you wanted to. So what I have done is I've drawn the outline of the snowman onto this fleece using the Frixion pen, so it'll disappear with heat. And what I will do is I will upload this PDF so that you can print out and cut out this template so that you don't have to draw it out yourselves. And that will be found in the link below, or you can find the link on my blog post on my website crafthousemagik.co.uk. So now that I've drawn out an outline onto the fabric, I'm just going to take time to just cut those out. So there we are, I've cut the two side panels out. A little tip that I've got is that I actually cut out this template on some template plastic and I've drawn the little facial features. I've traced these from this pattern and then I'm able to transfer those little marks on to the fleece material. It's difficult to show you very clearly. I think you can just about see it there, but it just gives me an idea of where I'm going to start my stitching for my facial features. So that's the first thing we're going to do. I'm going to get some beads ready. And I've already threaded my needle with some black thread. And I'm going to do a quilter's knot. So I take the thread next to my needle, hold it with my right hand and then wind the thread around the needle and then pull that little knot right to the end, and that forms a little knot there. It's not the neatest, but it's going to be on the inside anyway, so that doesn't matter. So I'm going to pop my needle through the point where my first eye is, and I'm going to get a little bead, place that there so you can see his first eye has appeared. You could of course use different colour beads if you'd like. and then I'm going to come up again where his second eye is. You can of course put these facial features on after you've sewn him together, but I do find it's easier to do it at this point, especially with the beads. So there's his little eyes, and you come up on the edge of the mouth. I do find that each time I do this it comes out very slightly different, but at least if you've got a guideline you can get the mouth in roughly the right place. So I've come out at the edge of the mouth and I'm going back in and out in about 3mm, so that's my stitch length. So you created the first stitch, but then I'm going to do a back stitch around this little blue line. So be careful to put your needle back in the place where your yarn came out of the work at this point. Oops. So you're just doing a little back stitch. So I'm just trying to make sure that this line of stitching is as straight as possible, or smooth as possible, so his mouth doesn't look too jagged. And then once I've finished, I'm just going to go back in to complete that stitch, and there we are. So I'm just going to knot that thread at the back of the work. Without taking the thread to the front of the work again so it would show. There we go, and I'm going to cut the end. So that's your facial features finished. There's bits of fluff on him. And now we're going to put the buttons on the tummy. So I'm going to use a cream thread for this. So I'm going to take, because I don't want it to show, I'm going to thread this needle. There we go. So I'm going to use the same method to tie a knot. It'll be less easy for you to see here. Just hold it alongside the needle, wrap it around about 3 times, hold it tightly with your thumb and forefinger, and then pull it down to nearly at the end of the yarn, and there we have a knot. So I'm going to just eyeball where these buttons are going to go. You can of course place your buttons onto the work before you start stitching so you can decide where you want your buttons, but I'm just going to stitch these onto the front piece like you normally would. You can of course stick these on with PVA glue at the end if you don't want to stitch them on. So I'm going to come down a little bit to put the second button on. I'm just trying to decide which one I want to put on first. I think I'm going to have the lighter one at the bottom, so I'm going to put this one on here. And just make sure that if you come down from this button to this button at the back, that you don't pull the thread too tightly, otherwise it will ruche up your fabric. There we go. It looks slightly on the wonk, my top one, because I'm trying to do this on through the camera for you, but you get the idea. That's the last button. There we go. I'm going to go to the back of the work and just stitch into a little bit of the material and then do a knot. And I'll do that again. And 2 knots should be enough. Then you can cut that off. So So there we are. Don't worry if you can see a little bit of the pen, because you can just pop your iron over that gently just to get rid of any of the marks that you've got left over from when you were cutting out and marking it. So it's now time to join the back and the front of your little snowman together. So I do this using blanket stitch, but because I'm going to do it in a very light thread on this white material, you're not going to be able to see my stitches. So I'm going to show you on a little sample how I do blanket stitch. So I'm going to take some black thread and the same chenille needle and use the same quilter's knot to make a knot at the end of the thread. And then I'm going to take my piece of material and I'm going to join this along this edge here, but we want to bury our knot between the two pieces of fabric, so I'm going to go inside there. Oops. And then bury that knot inside the material, and I'm just making sure that these two pieces of material are nicely aligned. Then I'm going to come from the back of the material and come through the same hole like so, and pull it until you've got a little loop. Then I'm going to go up through that loop, and then we're ready to go. So we want to move along the work this way, and we're coming from the back up through the material, leaving a loop, and then I go through this loop and pull so that you have a nice little stitch. And I'm going to keep doing this along the edge of the fabric. Through the loop. So there we are. You've got to try and get your stitches as evenly as possible across the work. So there we go. So that's blanket stitch, and I'm going to show you how I work around the snowman in the colour that's coordinating with the fleece fabric. So I've threaded my needle with about 1 metre of this white cotton. But you may find it easier to work with a smaller amount. I just don't like starting and finishing my material, my thread rather. So I'm going to start about here, and I'm going to stitch all the way around my snowman to about there, and then I'm going to start stuffing it and then finish off my blanket stitch. So here we go. You may find it easier to pop a pin in these to keep them nice and neatly together, and because you're actually using a matching thread rather than a contrast thread, you'll find that you can't see how neat your stitches are as much, so you can get away with being a little bit messy. So there we are, we're nearly all the way around. I've left that gap for the stuffing to go in. But before I start stuffing it, I'm just going to put the iron over it, not actually putting pressure on it, but just to get rid of these little blue marks on the edges of the fabric and on around the face. So I've just given him a little bit of a heat. I didn't actually touch the iron onto the material, and you may find that you want to just use a pressing cloth so that you don't melt the fleece. So I've got my stuffing, and I'm going to start stuffing him when I've got the thread still attached and I've got that little gap to stuff him with. You may want to use something to poke into the little arms and head. Careful you don't pop the end in, otherwise you'll have to dig it out. So there we are, I've stuffed him. It's probably best not to put too much stuff in, otherwise you'll find it hard to stitch up at the end. But you're just going to carry on with your blanket stitch. It's a little bit fiddlier because you have to hold it so the stuffing doesn't escape. There we are, so I've finished that. I'm just going to knot it off. And bury it into the fleece. There. Then I'm going to cut it close to the material. So you won't be able to see. So there he is, all sewed up. The next bit is to do the tab for the back of the head so we can hang him up. So I've cut 2 pieces of ribbon, one about 7 inches for the tab, one about 12 inches to go around his neck for a scarf, and I have actually melted the ends of these ribbon with a soldering iron. It's quite a low wattage of soldering iron that's used for craft projects, but if you haven't got a soldering iron, you can just melt the end of the ribbon with a lighter, or you can use a little bit of PVA glue to stop it from fraying at the ends there. So I'm going to place my ribbon one over the other, and I've got a needle and thread. I'm just using the same thick cotton that I was using before, and I'm going to put both sides of the ribbon face up, because this is the side going to be showing at the front of the little snowman. And I'm going to pop the knot this side, and I'm just going to trim it off so that you haven't got that hanging out. And then I'm going to put that onto the back of the snowman. I'm just holding it at this point, and then I'm going to scoop up into the fleece, and then I'm going to go to the centre and out, so that holds it on a little bit better. And I'm just going to do that a couple of times. So I went in and out, not going through the ribbon, and then to the centre and out, so that I've got 2 little stitches holding the snowman and his tie in place. So I'm just going to do that again. I probably don't need to do it again really, but just in case, I'm just doing some little stitches, oops, just to keep that little tie in place. There you go. So I'm just going to get a little bit of the fabric at the side so that I can make a knot. Then I'm just going to dig into the fabric to bury the end, and then cut it close there. So that's nice and secure now, that's not going to come off, and it's showing the pretty side of the ribbon to the front of the snowman. So now we've got the ribbon to do his little scarf. I'm going to wrap that round his neck so that the right side is facing upwards. And I'm going to try and do all the moves so that always the spotty is showing up. So I'm going to take the left side up through to make a little knot, and then I'm going to try and do the same sort of knot again, keeping the spotty side of the ribbon to the top. Oh, it's coming up a little bit, but it's difficult to make it so that you can see on the camera. So I've knotted it so that you can see that this part of the ribbon has the dotty part showing. It might take a couple of goes to get it so that the dotty part is showing to the front of the ribbon. But if you've got a double-sided ribbon, that's okay. And what I do, because these hang a little bit, I just dab a little bit of PVA glue on the ends of these ribbons. Oops. I've got some on my fingers so I can put it onto this side. So if you just glue those down, it's not going to move then, it's not going to flick up. So there's his little scarf, and the last thing to do is his little nose. So I have cut a little bit of yellowy coloured fleece here that I've got left over from another project. Because this is fleece, it doesn't fray too much, and I'm basically going to be folding that over to make a little nose shape. Now this is a little bit fiddly, so I'll dip it in some PVA glue, and it's best not to fiddle with this too much once you've put him on. So there we go. I think I'm really relatively happy with that. Don't move it around too much, otherwise you might have to reapply some glue on there. But that's his little face finished. I think this one I could have done with just making the stitches around the mouth just a little bit faced up so he's smiling a little bit more, but you get the idea. So I'll leave that to dry so that PVA glue dries, and then I can hang him on the Christmas tree. We're a little bit early in June for this, but it's nice to be prepared. So I've just added a little stitch just to make him smile a little bit more. It's more difficult to modify the little stitches for his mouth once he's sewn together, so it's best to do that in the beginning. But there we are. He's ready to go on the Christmas tree, and we've got some different versions that I've done. I've done a little gingerbread man and a little reindeer as well, so it's nice just to have a little bit of handmade on the Christmas tree. It's also a good thing to get kids into sewing, to get them doing the blanket stitch around the outside. But have fun, have a little go at doing different scarves and things and different features on the little snowman. And I hope you enjoyed this little video. So thank you so much for watching. If you like the tutorial, give me the thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more. Happy crafting, bye!